Hey guys, tonight we're stepping inside one of the coldest places imaginable, a medieval stone castle in the middle of winter. When most people think about queens, they imagine golden crowns, luxurious gowns, grand feasts, and lives of endless comfort. But once the sun disappeared and the castle doors closed for the night, even a queen had one problem she couldn't escape: the freezing cold. Without central heating, electric blankets, or insulated walls, how did medieval queens survive those long, bitter winter nights? Did roaring fireplaces actually keep them warm? Were their famous royal beds as comfortable as we imagine? Or were castle bedrooms far colder and far more uncomfortable than history books let on? Tonight, we'll uncover the forgotten secrets of royal sleep, from thick wool mattresses and luxurious fur blankets to bed warmers, loyal servants preparing the royal chamber, and the surprisingly clever tricks that helped queens stay warm while the icy wind howled outside. But before we begin, if you enjoy relaxing history that helps you unwind after a long day, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments which civilization you'd like us to visit next. Now, fluff your pillow, pull up your blanket, get comfortable, and let's quietly walk through the silent halls of a medieval castle, where a queen is preparing for another freezing winter night. Outside, snow settles gently across the dark countryside. The fields have long disappeared beneath a blanket of white, and the roads leading to the castle are silent. Even the horses in the stables stand close together, their warm breath drifting into the icy air. The castle rises above the frozen landscape like a mountain carved from stone. During daylight it looks magnificent, a symbol of royal power. But tonight, beneath a pale winter moon, its thick walls seem less welcoming than lonely, as though they have been standing against the cold for centuries without ever truly defeating it. The heavy wooden gates are already closed. Iron bars rest firmly in place. Guards wrapped in thick cloaks pace slowly along the walls, their boots crunching softly across frost-covered battlements. Every breath becomes a tiny cloud before disappearing into the darkness. Inside, the atmosphere changes, though perhaps not in the way many people expect. The great hall still carries the fading warmth of the evening fire. A few glowing embers remain beneath blackened logs while servants quietly clear away the last traces of supper. Silver goblets disappear into baskets. Long wooden tables become empty once again. Echoes replace conversation. The deeper you walk into the castle, the quieter everything becomes. Stone corridors stretch ahead, illuminated only by scattered candles flickering against rough walls. Their gentle light dances across ancient tapestries that serve a purpose beyond decoration. Thick woven fabrics help soften the drafts creeping through tiny cracks in the stone, yet the cold never truly leaves. It waits patiently in every staircase, every archway, every narrow window where winter winds whistle softly through imperfect shutters. Far above these silent corridors lives the queen. Her chambers are among the grandest rooms in the castle, but grandeur cannot erase nature. Even royalty must share the same winter as every farmer beyond the walls. Somewhere nearby, servants quietly carry bundles of fresh wood upstairs. Another carefully shields a candle flame with one hand while balancing folded blankets with the other. Their footsteps remain almost invisible beneath layers of woven rushes scattered across the floors to soften sound and trap a little warmth. Everything moves with practiced calm, no voices are raised, no doors slam. Night inside a medieval castle belongs to whispers. As you climb another winding staircase, narrow windows reveal glimpses of swirling snow outside. Tiny flakes catch the moonlight before disappearing into darkness again. The castle almost seems alive, its beams creak softly, its stones settle with quiet sighs. Its fireplaces breathe like sleeping giants, and somewhere beyond another carved oak door, preparations for the Queen's night have already begun, because sleeping well inside a freezing castle is never as simple as climbing into bed. Long before the Queen arrives, countless unseen hands transform a cold stone chamber into the warmest refuge the castle can possibly offer. Our next quiet step will take us through that private doorway, into the heart of the royal bedchamber itself. The heavy oak door opens without a sound, not because the hinges are perfect, but because generations of careful hands have learned exactly how to move it. One servant eases the latch, another steadies the weight of the timber, and the thick door slowly reveals the most private room in the entire castle, the Queen's bedchamber. Unlike the bustling great hall below, this room exists almost outside the rhythm of the castle. The conversations of courtiers, the clatter of dishes, and the footsteps of soldiers seem impossibly far away. Here, silence is carefully protected, as though disturbing the room itself would disturb the Queen's rest. At first glance, modern eyes might expect overwhelming luxury. Gold, marble, endless warmth. Instead, the chamber greets you with something quieter: stone walls, softened by richly woven tapestries. Heavy oak beams crossing the ceiling overhead. A polished wooden floor hidden beneath thick rush mats and colorful rugs imported from distant lands. Every object has its place, chosen as much for comfort as for beauty. The room is spacious, but space is not always a blessing in winter. The larger the chamber, the harder it is to keep warm. Several beeswax candles flicker from wrought iron holders mounted on the walls. Their soft light pools across carved furniture, casting long, gentle shadows that sway whenever the draught slips beneath the door. Nothing shines too brightly, everything glows. Near one wall stands an enormous carved chest bound with black iron. Inside rest carefully folded gowns, velvet mantles, embroidered linens, winter cloaks lined with fur, and delicate veils wrapped in lavender to keep insects away during warmer months. Beside it waits a smaller coffer containing treasured possessions: letters, prayer books, small ivory combs, tiny glass bottles of scented oils. Perhaps a keepsake from childhood, something with no political value at all, yet precious beyond measure. Even queens kept private memories. A writing table occupies another corner of the room. Goosefeather quills rest beside parchment covered in neat lines of careful handwriting. A seal of warm wax hardens slowly beside a folded letter that will travel across kingdoms after sunrise. Politics rarely sleeps, but tonight, those matters remain untouched. The Queen's thoughts are slowly turning away from councils and ceremonies, toward something far simpler: rest. Near the narrow window hangs a thick curtain of wool. It is not there merely for decoration. Behind the fabric, the glass, if there is glass at all, is small and uneven, often mixed with wooden shutters to keep out the bitter wind. Even so, tiny breaths of cold still find their way inside. You almost cannot feel them until the candle flames tremble. Across the room stands a kneeling bench before a beautifully carved crucifix. Here the Queen often spends her final quiet moments before retiring. Gratitude, worry, hope, fear, all are whispered into the stillness of the chamber before sleep claims the night. Faith offers warmth that no fireplace can provide. Nearby, embroidered cushions soften a pair of sturdy wooden chairs placed close to the hearth. They are not extravagant thrones but comfortable places for reading, sewing, or receiving trusted ladies in waiting during quieter hours. The fireplace itself glows gently, its flames dance across carefully stacked oak logs, sending fragrant smoke upward through a broad stone chimney. Yet despite its cheerful appearance, much of its precious heat escapes into the vast chimney above. The fire comforts the eyes almost as much as the body. The scent of burning oak mixes with beeswax candles, dried rosemary, lavender, and the faint aroma of polished wood. It is a fragrance impossible to recreate completely today, a blend born from natural materials, open fires, and centuries-old stone. Then your attention is quietly drawn toward the center of the chamber. There it stands, the royal bed. It is far taller than most modern beds, raised high above the floor on sturdy carved posts. Rich curtains remain tied back for now, revealing layers of blankets and fine linen waiting patiently for the Queen's arrival. At first glance it appears magnificent, but every detail hides a practical purpose that goes far beyond beauty. The towering posts, the enclosing curtains, the surprising height from the floor, none of them were designed simply to impress visitors. They were carefully crafted to fight an invisible enemy that filled every castle during winter, the cold. As the candles burn a little lower and the fire settles into quieter embers, our eyes naturally linger upon the remarkable bed, because in the next chamber of our journey, we'll discover why its unusual design became one of the cleverest inventions of the medieval world. The royal bed waits patiently in the glow of the fire. Its carved wooden frame promises warmth, comfort, and safety. Yet before anyone can truly appreciate the cleverness of the remarkable bed, there is another mystery to understand. Why was staying warm inside a castle such a challenge in the first place? After all, castles were built to be massive. Their walls were astonishingly thick, sometimes stretching more than 3 meters across. Their towers dominated the landscape, and their stone foundations had survived generations of kings, queens, storms, and wars. Surely walls that powerful could keep out the cold. Strangely enough, they did almost the opposite. Stone is wonderfully strong. It is not wonderfully warm. During the long months of winter, every block of limestone, granite, or sandstone slowly absorbed the bitter cold from the outside world. Day after day, night after night, the walls became enormous reservoirs of icy temperature. By sunset, they were already cold. By midnight, they seemed to breathe winter itself. Even if a roaring fire had burned all evening, much of its precious warmth disappeared into the surrounding stone. The wall silently drank in the heat without ever seeming satisfied. The Queen did not simply live inside a cold room. She lived inside a building that constantly stole warmth away. As you stand quietly within her chamber, you might notice something unusual. The fire crackles softly, the candles glow peacefully, yet your breath still lingers in the air. That was perfectly normal. Visitors from warmer climates often wrote with surprise about the chill inside northern European castles. Some described sleeping while wearing several layers of clothing. Others spoke of waking to frost collecting on the inside of window frames. Comfort was always relative. The castle protected its inhabitants from invading armies far better than it protected them from winter. Look upward. The ceiling stretches high above, supported by enormous oak beams darkened with age. Those lofty ceilings created an impressive sense of grandeur, but they also allowed precious warm air to drift far overhead, gathering where nobody could enjoy it. Near the floor, where people actually lived, the air remained stubbornly cold. Now glance toward the windows. Compared with modern homes, they appear surprisingly small. There was a reason. Large windows would have invited even more freezing wind inside. Glass itself remained expensive and imperfect. Many castles relied upon wooden shutters, oiled parchment, or tiny leaded panes that admitted light while doing very little to stop winter's icy fingers. Tiny gaps remained everywhere, around shutters, beneath doors, between stones. The wind never needed a large opening. A crack no wider than a finger was enough. Listen carefully, perhaps you can almost hear it. A soft whistle winding through ancient corridors, a gentle sigh beneath the door. The castle speaks in the language of winter. Servants fought these invisible drafts every day. Thick tapestries covered walls not only because they displayed wealth but because layers of woven wool trapped pockets of air, offering a small barrier against the cold stone behind them. Rushes scattered across the floors served a similar purpose. They softened footsteps, absorbed moisture, and helped separate cold stone from weary feet. Every layer mattered, every blanket, every rug, every hanging cloth. Together they created tiny islands of comfort within an otherwise unforgiving fortress. The queen herself understood this reality better than anyone. She did not wander barefoot across polished stone. She wore soft leather slippers lined with wool. She draped heavy cloaks across her shoulders even indoors. Her ladies-in-waiting often carried extra shawls during especially bitter evenings, ready to place them gently around her without being asked. Winter shaped daily life as surely as royal ceremony did. Even the furniture reflected this quiet struggle. Large wooden cabinets stood against outer walls, adding another layer between people and the freezing stone beyond. Upholstered chairs retained warmth longer than bare benches. Thick curtains divided rooms, reducing the endless movement of cold air through the castle. Nothing was accidental. Centuries of experience had taught builders and households alike that survival depended upon understanding the nature of stone. Yet perhaps the greatest irony of all was this: the strongest castles often felt the coldest. The very features that made them nearly impossible to conquer, the towering walls, soaring ceilings, narrow windows, and endless stone passages, also created an environment where winter lingered long after snow had begun to fall. A queen could command armies, she could negotiate treaties, she could influence kingdoms, but she could not order the cold to leave her chamber. Instead, she relied upon something far more practical than royal authority: ingenious design. And nowhere was that ingenuity more beautifully hidden than in the remarkable bed waiting quietly beside the fire, where every carved post and every heavy curtain had been crafted with a single comforting purpose. That remarkable secret awaits us next, as we draw closer to the heart of the Queen's nightly refuge. The fire continues its quiet conversation with the winter air, sending gentle waves of warmth across the chamber before they disappear into the towering ceiling. Yet your attention is no longer drawn to the hearth. It rests instead upon the great bed standing patiently at the center of the room. To modern eyes, a four-poster bed often appears to be little more than a symbol of wealth, an elaborate piece of furniture built to impress visitors with carved oak, embroidered curtains, and towering posts reaching toward the ceiling. But for a medieval queen, this bed was something far more important. It was shelter within shelter, a warm island inside a cold sea of stone. The bed itself was usually built by master craftsmen, using solid oak that could endure decades, sometimes even centuries. Its heavy frame was not only beautiful but remarkably practical. Thick timber resisted the dampness that often crept into castle rooms during long winters, and its sturdy construction supported layer upon layer of bedding without bending beneath the weight. Every carved pillar had a purpose, every beam carried more than decoration. The foot-tall posts supported a wooden canopy above, creating what was almost a small room within the larger chamber. From this frame hung heavy curtains woven from wool, velvet, or richly lined fabric, depending on the queen's wealth and the kingdom's resources. During the day, these curtains remained tied back. The bed looked grand and welcoming, allowing light from the candles and hearth to reach every corner. But when night arrived, everything changed. Servants quietly loosened the ties, allowing the curtains to fall gently around the bed. The outside world disappeared. The chamber, already silent, became even quieter. The thick fabric formed a protective barrier that trapped precious warmth around the sleeper. Instead of allowing every bit of heat to drift into the vast room, the enclosed space held warm air close to the body. It was not perfectly insulated, far from it, but compared to sleeping in the open chamber, the difference could be remarkable. Imagine placing your hands beneath a blanket on a cold evening. Within moments, your own body begins creating a pocket of warmth. The four-poster bed worked in much the same way. Once the curtains were closed, the Queen's body heat, combined with whatever warmth remained from bed warmers or nearby fires, stayed inside the enclosed space far longer than it would have in the open air. The canopy overhead offered another advantage. Dust, soot, and tiny particles from smoky fireplaces often drifted downward from the exposed beams above. The wooden roof of the bed helped shield the sleeping Queen from much of this, creating a cleaner, calmer place to rest beneath. Privacy mattered as well. Although queens enjoyed far greater comfort than most people, they were rarely alone. Ladies-in-waiting, trusted attendants, nurses, and personal servants often remained nearby, ready to respond if called during the night. The bed curtains offered a rare sense of personal space. Behind the soft folds of fabric, the Queen could pray, read by candlelight, speak quietly with her closest companions, or simply enjoy a few peaceful moments away from watchful eyes. It was one of the few places where royal life became almost ordinary. Children sometimes climbed into these beds during particularly cold nights, especially young princes and princesses who sought comfort beside their mother. Stories were whispered, prayers were shared. Outside, winter storms battered the castle walls. Inside those curtains, another world existed, small, warm, safe. The bedding itself added to this cocoon. Layers of linen sheets rested beneath thick wool blankets, luxurious furs, and feather-filled coverings. Instead of relying on one heavy blanket, servants arranged multiple layers that trapped pockets of warm air between them. Centuries before modern insulation, people had already discovered one of its simplest secrets. Many thin layers often worked better than one thick one. Even the height of the bed served a purpose. Cold air naturally settled near the floor, especially across freezing stone flags. By raising the mattress well above ground level, sleepers escaped some of the coldest air circulating through the chamber. Climbing into bed required a small stool. But that extra height brought welcome comfort throughout the night. Perhaps this is why medieval visitors often described royal beds with such admiration, not because they were merely expensive, but because they represented centuries of practical wisdom hidden beneath elegant craftsmanship. Every curtain, every feather, every carved post, every carefully chosen layer. Together they transformed a freezing stone room into the closest thing a medieval queen could call a sanctuary. Still, even this remarkable bed could not warm itself. Before the Queen ever slipped beneath its blankets, another quiet ritual unfolded beyond the curtains. In the dim glow of candlelight, unseen servants prepared the chamber with extraordinary care, ensuring that every detail was ready before their mistress retired for the night. And so, as the bed waits patiently in the gentle firelight, we quietly follow those faithful hands into the next part of our journey, where we'll discover how servants prepared the royal bedroom. The curtains of the great bed remain gently open, waiting. The fire crackles softly against the stone hearth, its warm glow dancing across carved oak furniture and woven tapestries. Outside, winter continues its patient work. Snow drifts against the castle walls, and somewhere high above, the wind hums through the battlements like a distant choir. Inside the Queen's chamber, however, another rhythm begins. It is quiet, almost invisible. Long before the Queen arrives, her servants have already begun preparing the room for the night. There is no hurried scrambling, no shouted instructions. Everything unfolds with calm precision, practiced through years of habit. Every servant knows exactly what must be done, and in what order. Their movements are so familiar that they hardly need to speak. One lady in waiting quietly checks the candles. She trims each blackened wick with a small pair of shears, ensuring the flames will burn steadily rather than filling the chamber with smoke. Fresh beeswax candles replace those that have burned too low, their gentle honey scent blending with the aroma of oak from the fireplace. Another servant kneels beside the hearth. Using a long iron poker, she carefully rearranges the glowing logs. A few fresh pieces of seasoned wood are added, not enough to create roaring flames, but enough to keep a steady warmth through the first hours of the night. Dry oak is preferred, for it burns slowly and with less smoke than green timber. Nearby, another attendant quietly sweeps away loose ash that has settled on the stone floor. Even this simple task is performed carefully. Ash scattered across the chamber could stain expensive gowns or fine bed linens. Cleanliness, especially in a royal room, is a quiet form of respect. The attention then turns toward the bed. The linen sheets are stretched smooth by practiced hands. Any wrinkle is gently pulled away. The feather mattress is lightly shaken, allowing the filling inside to settle evenly after a day's use. Unlike modern spring mattresses, these feather beds required frequent care to remain comfortable. A neglected mattress could become lumpy, cold, and unpleasant. The servants understand this well. They know that comfort is created little by little, one careful touch at a time. Heavy wool blankets are unfolded next. Each layer is arranged with remarkable precision. Thick winter blankets rest beneath softer coverings, while luxurious furs remain folded near the foot of the bed until the final moments before the Queen retires. Nothing is left to chance. Even the pillows receive careful attention. Feather-filled cushions are gently fluffed, restoring their softness after many hours of use. Some are placed upright against the carved headboard for evening reading or prayer, while others are laid flat beneath crisp linen pillowcases embroidered with delicate patterns. The room slowly begins to feel alive, not with noise, but with preparation. Across the chamber, another servant opens a carved chest. Inside rest small linen sachets filled with dried lavender, rosemary, chamomile, and sweet marjoram. These fragrant herbs are tucked discreetly between blankets, placed inside clothing chests, or hung near the bed. Their purpose is wonderfully practical. They help discourage insects. They freshen the air, and perhaps, though no one could truly prove it, they offered a little comfort to restless minds after long days filled with royal duties. The Queen herself may never notice each sachet individually, but together they create an atmosphere of quiet peace. A silver basin is placed upon a nearby stand. Fresh water, carried carefully through the castle, is poured into it for washing before bed. Beside it rests a folded linen towel, still slightly warm from hanging near the kitchen hearth earlier in the evening. Luxury in the medieval world was often measured not by extravagance, but by thoughtful preparation. One servant inspects the window shutters. She presses them firmly closed, securing the wooden latch against the strengthening wind outside. Heavy wool curtains are drawn tightly across the narrow openings, adding another small barrier against the night's relentless cold. Another quietly removes the Queen's jewelry from the dressing table, placing each ring, brooch, and chain into a velvet-lined box. Nothing is misplaced, everything has its home. As the final preparations near completion, the chamber grows wonderfully still. The servants pause. They look around the room with experienced eyes. The fire burns steadily. The candles glow gently. The bedding is perfectly arranged. Fresh herbs scent the air. Warmth, though modest, has been gathered from every possible source. Only one thing remains missing: the Queen herself. Soon she will step through the great oak door, leaving behind the formal duties of the court for the quiet comfort of her private chamber, and waiting nearby will be another collection of treasures, not jewels or crowns, but soft wool, rich furs, and feather-filled bedding that would protect her from the freezing night ahead. As the chamber settles into peaceful silence once more, our journey gently continues toward the comforting embrace of fur blankets, wool, and feather mattresses. The chamber is finally ready. The candles burn with quiet, steady flames. The fire has settled into glowing embers that radiate a gentle warmth across the room. Outside, the winter wind still circles the towers, searching patiently for every crack in the ancient stone. But inside the Queen's bedchamber, another kind of protection has already been prepared. Not walls, not armor, but layers. The moment has come to look more closely at what truly separated a medieval queen from the bitter cold of the night. The bed itself may have been magnificent, but it was the bedding that transformed it into a place of comfort. Unlike modern mattresses made with springs or memory foam, medieval beds relied almost entirely on natural materials. Everything came from the land, from forests, fields, and farms. Each layer reflected centuries of quiet experience, passed from one generation to the next. At the very bottom rested sturdy ropes stretched tightly across the wooden bed frame. These ropes formed a flexible foundation. Every few weeks, servants tightened them carefully, pulling them firm so the mattress above would not sag. It is from this simple task that an old saying is believed to have grown: sleep tight. Whether every historian agrees or not, the image remains fitting. A well-tightened bed meant a better night's rest. Above the ropes lay the feather mattress. It looked soft, almost cloud-like, but reaching that softness required remarkable effort. The filling came from countless goose feathers, gathered patiently over many seasons. Feathers were carefully cleaned, dried, and packed into strong linen covers. The result was a mattress that gently shaped itself around the sleeper instead of resisting every movement. For a queen, this was among the finest comforts available. Yet even feather mattresses had their challenges. Over time, the feathers shifted. Some corners became fuller than others. Without regular shaking and turning, the mattress could become uneven, leaving uncomfortable hollows where warmth escaped more easily. That is why servants fluffed and rotated the bedding so often. Comfort was never permanent. It had to be maintained. Above the mattress came smooth linen sheets. Linen, woven from flax, felt cool when first touched, but it quickly adapted to body temperature. Unlike rougher fabrics, well-made linen breathed naturally while remaining surprisingly durable. Wealthier households prized finely woven linen for its softness, and queens often possessed beautifully embroidered sets reserved for special occasions or important guests. Then came the wool. If feathers offered softness, wool offered survival. Sheep's wool possessed an extraordinary quality that medieval people understood through experience, even if they could not explain the science behind it. Tiny pockets of air trapped within the fibers slowed the escape of body heat, creating a natural blanket against the cold. One wool blanket helped, several worked even better. Instead of relying upon a single heavy covering, servants layered multiple blankets across the bed. Each created another barrier, another quiet shield against winter's relentless chill. The blankets themselves varied in texture. Some were coarse and thick, others were surprisingly fine, woven by skilled artisans whose work was admired across Europe. At the very top rested the greatest luxury of all, furs. The queen's winter bedding might include ermine, squirrel, fox, marten, or rabbit, depending on the kingdom's wealth and the fashions of the time. These furs were astonishingly warm, their dense coats holding heat close while remaining lighter than many woven fabrics. To medieval people, fur was more than decoration. It was one of nature's finest insulators. Running your hand across its surface would reveal a softness that contrasted beautifully with the rough stone walls surrounding the bed. Sometimes a fur coverlet was placed only over the feet, where cold often crept in first. Other nights, it covered the entire bed like a gentle winter forest wrapped around the sleeping queen. Even the pillows reflected careful thought. Large feather pillows supported the head and shoulders, while smaller cushions helped ease pressure during long winter nights. Pregnant queens, elderly royals, or those recovering from illness often received additional cushions arranged for comfort rather than appearance. Everything served a purpose, nothing was chosen by accident. The colors themselves were calming: cream-colored linen, soft brown wool, silvery fur, deep crimson embroidery. In the gentle candlelight, the bed seemed less like a piece of furniture and more like a peaceful nest built against the season itself. Perhaps that is the greatest surprise of all. Royal comfort was rarely about extravagance alone, it was about understanding nature. Knowing which materials trapped warmth, which fabrics breathed, which layers protected, and how patience, skill, and countless small decisions could turn an icy stone chamber into a place where peaceful sleep was finally possible. Still, even the finest blankets began the night cold. No matter how luxurious the bedding appeared, climbing into an unheated bed on a freezing winter evening could still send a shiver through anyone's body, even a queen's. Fortunately, medieval households had one more clever solution waiting quietly beside the hearth, as the fire glows softly and the servants make their final preparations. We'll soon discover one of the most comforting inventions of the Middle Ages: medieval bed warmers and hot stones. The bed now appears wonderfully inviting. Layers of linen rest beneath thick wool blankets. Soft furs catch the golden glow of the fireplace, and feather pillows wait patiently beneath the carved wooden canopy. Everything seems ready for a peaceful night's sleep, yet there is one quiet truth every medieval queen understood: even the finest bed in the kingdom began the evening cold. No amount of beautiful bedding could change that. The feather mattress had spent the entire day absorbing the chill of the castle. The linen sheets felt crisp to the touch. The blankets, though wonderfully warm once wrapped around a sleeping body, offered little comfort during those first few moments after climbing beneath them. On the coldest winter nights, that first touch could be startling, so, long before the queen entered her chamber, another gentle ritual unfolded beside the fire. One of the servants approached the hearth carrying a curious object. It looked almost like a small wooden box attached to the end of a long handle. Inside the box rested glowing embers, carefully taken from the fireplace. Tiny holes carved into the lid allowed warm air to escape while keeping the burning coals safely enclosed. This was the medieval bed warmer. It was simple, elegant, and remarkably effective. Holding the long handle, the servant slowly lifted the warmer onto the bed. There was no rushing, no careless movement. With smooth, steady motions, she guided the warming pan beneath the blankets, allowing gentle heat to spread across the linen and feather mattress. The warmth moved slowly through the layers, not enough to make the bed hot, only enough to chase away the icy bite that had settled there throughout the day. The servant remained attentive the entire time. The coals were watched carefully, for even a small mistake near dry fabrics could become dangerous. Experienced hands knew exactly how long the warmer should remain beneath the covers before it was removed again. The goal was comfort, never excess. By the time the queen arrived, the sheets no longer felt frozen against the skin. Instead, they greeted her with a gentle warmth that made the first moments of rest far more pleasant. Not every household owned such carefully crafted bed warmers. Many castles relied upon another equally practical solution: hot stones, smooth river stones, or carefully chosen pieces of dense rock were placed near the fireplace for hours before bedtime. They absorbed the steady heat of the flames without cracking, becoming natural stores of warmth. When ready, servants wrapped the heated stones inside thick wool cloths or small linen bags. The wrapping was essential. No one wished to place bare hot stone directly against delicate bedding or skin. Once safely covered, the stones were tucked beneath the blankets, often near the foot of the bed where cold seemed to linger longest. There they quietly released their warmth. Minute by minute, hour by hour, sometimes ceramic jugs filled with heated water served the same purpose. Though they were heavier and more fragile than stones, they provided another welcome source of gentle heat during especially bitter winters. The remarkable thing about these methods is how familiar they still feel today. A modern hot water bottle, a heated blanket, a warming pad, all share the same simple idea that medieval people understood centuries ago. A little warmth before sleep changes everything. Of course, servants paid careful attention to safety. Hot stones that were too warm could scorch fabric. Bed warmers left unattended might damage expensive linens. The Queen's chamber was filled with valuable textiles that had taken months, sometimes years, to produce. Carelessness had no place here. Experience guided every decision. Some noble households even worn the Queen's night clothes near the fire before she changed for bed. A linen shift that had rested beside the hearth felt infinitely more welcoming than one taken from a cold wooden chest. Small comforts mattered, especially during the longest nights of winter. As the warming pan was returned to the fireplace and the hot stones settled quietly beneath the blankets, the chamber seemed to breathe a little easier. The air still carried winter's chill. The stone walls remained cold. The wind still whispered beyond the shutters, but inside the bed, inside those carefully layered blankets, a tiny island of warmth had been created. It would not last forever. By morning, the heat would fade, and the cold would slowly return. Yet for those precious first hours of sleep, the Queen could close her eyes knowing that countless thoughtful hands had prepared a refuge against the season. Even so, there remained one constant companion through every winter night. The fireplace. Its glowing flames appeared comforting from across the room, but appearances can be wonderfully deceiving, for despite its cheerful light, the great hearth struggled against forces far greater than itself. As another log settles into glowing embers and sparks drift lazily upward, we quietly turn toward the ancient stone chimney, where we'll discover fireplaces that barely heated the room. The glowing embers settle quietly within the hearth. For a moment, the fireplace appears victorious. Orange flames dance across blackened oak logs, sending flickering light across carved furniture and embroidered tapestries. Shadows sway gently along the ancient stone walls, and the room feels almost inviting. Almost. Stand close enough to the fire, and its warmth reaches your face. Take only a few slow steps backward, and the cold quietly returns. It is one of the great surprises of medieval castles. We often imagine enormous roaring fireplaces keeping every chamber warm throughout winter. Paintings, films, and fairy tales have taught us to picture castles glowing with endless comfort. Reality was far gentler and far colder. The Queen's fireplace was certainly impressive. Its stone arch stretched wide enough for several thick oak logs to burn at once. Skilled masons had designed the chimney to draw smoke upward, allowing the room to remain livable instead of filling with choking fumes. Yet the very feature that carried away the smoke also carried away much of the precious heat. As flames climbed higher, warm air rushed upward into the chimney, disappearing into the winter sky. The fire worked tirelessly. The chimney worked even harder. A surprising amount of warmth never stayed inside the chamber at all. The servants understood this. Without needing books or scientific explanations, they knew that sitting directly beside the hearth could feel pleasantly warm. but the far side of the room remained chilly enough that your breath might still become visible on especially cold nights. Heat simply refused to travel very far. The vast size of royal chambers made the problem even greater. The ceiling soared high above, supported by heavy oak beams darkened by generations of wood smoke. Every wave of rising warmth drifted upward, gathering beneath the roof where no one slept, no one sat, and no one truly benefited from it. The Queen rested many feet below. The heat rested above. Between them stretched a great empty space. The stone walls quietly absorbed whatever warmth managed to escape the fireplace, like thirsty earth drinking rain. The castle itself seemed to consume every precious degree of heat. By midnight, those walls still felt cold beneath an outstretched hand, no matter how faithfully the fire burned, no matter how many logs the servants carried. Fuel itself demanded constant attention. Firewood did not appear by magic. Foresters, woodcutters, teamsters, stable workers, and castle servants all played a part in keeping the royal hearth alive through winter. Great stacks of seasoned oak, ash, and beech were gathered months before the first snowfall. Each log had been cut, split, dried, transported, and carefully stored beneath shelter. Every fire represented the labor of countless unseen hands. A careless blaze that consumed too much wood too quickly was considered wasteful. Instead, experienced servants learned to build steady fires, not the brightest, not the largest, simply the most dependable. During the deepest hours of the night, the flames were often allowed to shrink into glowing embers. Enough to provide gentle warmth, enough to relight easily before dawn, enough to avoid exhausting precious supplies before winter had ended. The scent of the fireplace became part of castle life itself. Burning oak released a rich, comforting aroma. Occasionally, herbs such as rosemary or juniper were placed near the hearth, allowing their fragrant oils to drift gently through the chamber. The air carried hints of wood, beeswax, wool, and old stone. It was the scent of winter. The sound mattered too. Listen carefully. The quiet crackle of burning logs, the soft settling of glowing embers, the occasional whisper of sparks floating upward into the chimney. These gentle sounds filled the silence without disturbing it. For the Queen, the fireplace was more than a source of warmth. It offered companionship, a steady glow during long evenings of prayer, a comforting light while reading by candle flame, a reassuring presence when fierce winds rattled the shutters beyond the walls. Perhaps that is why medieval people loved their hearths despite their limitations. They knew the fire could never conquer winter completely. That was never its purpose. Its purpose was hope, to remind those gathered around it that warmth still existed, even when snow buried the countryside and darkness arrived long before supper, as the flames gradually softened into a bed of glowing coals. Another quiet truth begins to reveal itself. If fireplaces alone could not keep a queen warm, then perhaps the greatest protection came from somewhere much closer, not from the fire, not from the walls, but from the thick curtains quietly surrounding the royal bed itself. As the last sparks drift lazily into the chimney and candlelight grows softer with the passing hour, we gently draw nearer to those heavy folds of fabric, where we'll uncover why curtains around the bed mattered. The fire has settled into a quiet bed of glowing embers. Its gentle light still reaches across the chamber, but its warmth fades with every passing hour. Beyond the shutters, the winter wind continues its slow journey around the castle towers, brushing against ancient stone that has stood through countless seasons. Inside the Queen's chamber, however, another defense quietly awaits. It hangs from 4 carved posts, softly folded, patiently still, the curtains surrounding the royal bed. To modern eyes, bed curtains often seem like little more than decoration. They appear elegant in paintings, luxurious in films, and perhaps even unnecessary in today's warm homes, yet inside a freezing medieval castle, they were among the cleverest comforts ever created. As bedtime approaches, one of the Queen's attendants walks calmly toward the bed. With practiced hands, she unties the braided cords holding the heavy curtains in place. Slowly, almost silently, the thick fabric falls, one side, then another, until the great bed becomes a room within a room. The transformation feels almost magical. Only moments ago, the bed stood open to the vast stone chamber. Now it has become its own quiet sanctuary. The curtains themselves are far heavier than many people imagine. They are not delicate lace or thin decorative cloth. Most are woven from thick wool, sturdy linen lined with additional fabric, or rich velvet in the wealthiest royal households. Some are even trimmed with fur along the edges during the coldest months. Their beauty is undeniable, but their purpose is wonderfully practical. The enclosed space traps warm air around the sleeper. Body heat, gathered beneath layers of blankets, no longer escapes so quickly into the enormous chamber. Instead, it lingers inside the curtain walls, creating a small pocket of comfort where the Queen can finally relax. The difference is subtle, not dramatic, yet on a freezing January night, even a few degrees of warmth could transform sleep from miserable to peaceful. The curtains also softened another constant companion of castle life, drafts. No matter how carefully servants sealed the windows and doors, tiny currents of icy air wandered endlessly through the stone corridors. They slipped beneath doors, around shutters, between ancient stones. Within the enclosed bed, these wandering drafts became far less noticeable. The curtains slowed their movement, allowing the air inside to remain calmer and gentler throughout the night. There was another blessing as well: silence. Castles were rarely completely quiet. Somewhere below, a guard changed watch, a horse shifted inside the stable, a servant carried fresh wood through distant corridors, the wind sighed across the battlements. The curtains muffled these sounds just enough to make the chamber feel wonderfully peaceful, not silent, but softer. Almost as though the bed itself were listening to the castle breathe. Privacy, too, held great importance. Although queens possessed remarkable authority, they enjoyed surprisingly little solitude. Ladies-in-waiting often slept nearby. Trusted attendants remained close in case assistance was needed during the night. Physicians, nurses, or family members occasionally visited even after sunset. Complete privacy was rare. Once the curtains were drawn, however, the Queen gained a small world of her own. Within those folds of fabric, she could whisper evening prayers without interruption, read quietly by candlelight, reflect upon the day's joys and burdens, or simply close her eyes without feeling watched. It was one of the few places where ceremony faded away. Here, she was not only a queen, she was simply another human being seeking warmth, rest, and peace before another demanding day. The candle placed near the bedside glowed gently through the fabric, creating a soft golden light that filtered across the enclosed space. Outside the curtains, the chamber remained vast and shadowed. Inside, everything felt smaller, safer, more intimate, almost like the comforting shelter of a woodland cabin hidden within a great stone fortress. The curtains even protected expensive bedding from drifting soot and dust. Smoke from fireplaces, though carried upward by chimneys, never disappeared completely. Tiny particles floated through castle rooms, settling upon furniture, tapestries, and linens. The enclosed bed remained noticeably cleaner, another quiet advantage discovered through generations of experience. Perhaps that is why these curtains became such enduring symbols of royal life, not because they represented luxury alone, but because they answered so many simple human needs. Warmth, privacy, quiet, comfort, a place to breathe deeply while winter whispered outside. As the queen finally steps behind the drawn curtains and the chamber settles into peaceful stillness, another thoughtful preparation quietly awaits. Before she closes her eyes, she will exchange the heavy garments of the royal court for clothing made not for ceremony, but for sleep itself, and in those simple layers lies another forgotten story of comfort, practicality, and gentle warmth. As the candlelight softens behind the curtain walls, we quietly follow her evening preparations into the next chapter. Night clothes of a medieval queen. Behind the drawn curtains, the world becomes wonderfully smaller, the vast stone chamber fades into gentle shadow. The distant crackle of the fireplace grows softer, and the restless winter wind becomes little more than a quiet whisper beyond layers of wool, timber, and ancient stone. Within this peaceful enclosure, the queen is finally free from the weight of ceremony. The jeweled crown has already been placed inside its carved chest. Heavy necklaces no longer rest upon her shoulders. The embroidered robes worn throughout the day have served their purpose. Now, another transformation quietly begins. Not one of power, but of comfort. Modern imagination often dresses medieval queens in elaborate gowns from sunrise until bedtime. As though royalty never escaped layers of silk, velvet, and precious jewels, the truth was far more human. Like everyone else, a queen changed into clothing made for sleep. The process itself was unhurried. A trusted lady-in-waiting carefully helped loosen ribbons, unfasten tiny hooks, and untie the cords that held the day's garments together. Many royal dresses were surprisingly complex, requiring patient hands rather than hurried movements. One layer disappeared, then another. Each felt a little lighter than the last. The heavy outer gown, lined with expensive fabric and embroidered with golden thread, was gently folded rather than carelessly tossed aside. Every garment represented months of skilled work by weavers, dyers, embroiderers, and tailors. Nothing was treated casually. Once removed, the gown was brushed carefully to remove dust gathered throughout the day before being placed neatly upon a carved wooden stand or folded inside a cedar-lined chest. Only then did the queen slip into her nightclothes. The most common garment was a long linen shift, simple, soft, wonderfully practical. Unlike richly decorated court clothing, the sleeping shift was usually plain in appearance. It reached nearly to the ankles, its loose sleeves allowing complete freedom of movement beneath the blankets. Fine linen felt remarkably gentle against the skin. Woven from flax, it breathed naturally while remaining surprisingly durable. Wealthier queens often enjoyed exceptionally smooth linen produced by highly skilled craftsmen, but even the finest examples valued comfort above display. No one needed to admire a sleeping gown. It existed only to provide peaceful rest. During particularly cold winters, the linen shift rarely worked alone. Additional woolen garments might be worn over it. A soft wool overdress, a lightly woven mantle, or a warm shawl could remain around the shoulders until the bed itself had fully warmed beneath the blankets. Some queens even slept wearing finely knitted wool stockings. Cold feet had troubled humanity for centuries. Royal blood offered no protection against icy toes. The head received careful attention as well. Many medieval women wore a simple linen cap while sleeping. This light covering helped keep long hair tidy throughout the night, while offering a little extra warmth around the head and ears. Hair itself represented countless hours of care, brushing, and braiding. Protecting it while sleeping simply made good sense. Jewelry, of course, was removed. Heavy rings, jeweled brooches, elaborate girdles, and ornate chains would have been uncomfortable beneath blankets. Only occasionally might a small devotional object remain nearby, a tiny cross resting upon the bedside table or a cherished relic kept close during sleep. Perfume was used sparingly, rather than overwhelming fragrances. Queens often preferred subtle scents drawn from nature itself. a drop of rose water upon the wrists, lavender gently rubbed into the linen, a hint of rosemary lingering from the herbal sachets placed among the bedding. These familiar aromas blended quietly with the beeswax candles and burning oak, creating an atmosphere both peaceful and deeply comforting. There was another reason night clothes remained so simple. Laundry demanded tremendous effort. Every piece of linen had to be washed by hand, carried to streams or large tubs, scrubbed, rinsed, dried, and pressed. Complicated garments required even greater care. Simple sleeping clothes could be cleaned more frequently, helping maintain freshness despite the challenges of medieval life. Perhaps this reveals something unexpected. The Queen's greatest luxury was not endless extravagance, it was thoughtful comfort, soft linen after a long day, warm stockings on a freezing night, a freshly brushed gown waiting for tomorrow, small kindnesses woven quietly into everyday life. As the lady-in-waiting extinguishes one candle and leaves another burning gently beside the bed, the Queen is no longer dressed for audiences, ceremonies, or royal banquets. She is dressed for sleep. The weight of the kingdom has not disappeared, but for a little while, it rests outside the curtains. Soon even these final preparations will come to an end, before climbing beneath the carefully warmed blankets. However, one last peaceful ritual remains, a quiet hour belonging not to politics or ceremony, but to reflection, gratitude, and gentle routine. As the chamber settles into comforting silence and the candle casts its final golden glow across the linen folds, we quietly remain beside the Queen, to witness the Queen's evening routine before sleep. The Queen's chamber has grown quieter with every passing moment. The heavy gown has been carefully folded away. The jewels that once represented authority and status now rest inside a secure wooden chest. The soft linen of her sleeping clothes feels completely different from the formal garments worn throughout the day. For the first time since morning, the Queen is no longer preparing to be seen, she is preparing to rest. But sleep does not arrive instantly in a medieval castle. The transition from a busy day of royal responsibilities into a peaceful night follows a gentle rhythm, one shaped by tradition, faith, and the simple human desire to end the day with calm thoughts. The evening begins slowly. A trusted attendant brings a small basin of warm water to the bedside. The water has been heated near the kitchen hearth, carried carefully through the quiet corridors before reaching the private chamber. It is not a modern bath. There are no endless streams of hot water, no separate room filled with steam. Instead, comfort comes through small acts of care, a warm cloth, a gentle washing of hands and face, a moment to remove the dust and exhaustion gathered throughout the day. For a queen, these small comforts were precious. The castle could be cold. The duties could be demanding, but these final moments belong to peace. After washing, the Queen may sit near the fireplace or beside a small table illuminated by candlelight. Here, the pace of the day slows completely. Letters waiting for answers remain closed. Reports from distant lands are left for tomorrow. The concerns of court are allowed to rest outside the chamber walls. Sometimes a Queen's evening included reading. Books were rare treasures during the medieval period, especially beautifully prepared manuscripts written by hand. A religious text, a collection of prayers, or a carefully preserved story might be opened beneath the warm glow of a candle. The turning of each page would be gentle, the words would be read slowly. There was no rush. Reading was not only a way to gain knowledge, it was a way to quiet the mind. The flickering candle beside the manuscript created a scene that feels almost timeless. A woman seated in a stone room, a small circle of light surrounded by darkness. A few precious pages, holding the attention of someone who had spent an entire day surrounded by voices and expectations. Another important part of the evening was conversation. Although medieval queens often lived surrounded by servants and nobles, true moments of personal connection were limited. The final hours before sleep might be spent speaking quietly with a trusted companion. A lady-in-waiting might share news from the household. A family member might visit briefly. A child might come seeking one last comforting word before bedtime. These moments reveal something easily forgotten. Behind the crown was a person, someone who needed companionship, someone who experienced ordinary emotions, someone who also carried worries into the darkness. Before entering the bed, many medieval Christians followed evening prayers. The exact practices varied depending on the period and region, but prayer was deeply connected to daily life. The night was viewed as a moment to reflect, give thanks, and seek protection through the hours when darkness surrounded the world. The queen might kneel beside her bed or sit quietly with hands folded. The candles would burn lower. The fireplace would soften. The castle beyond the chamber would continue its endless sounds, yet inside the room, everything became still. There was also a practical side to preparing for sleep. Servants checked the chamber one final time. The fire was adjusted. The curtains were inspected. The bed coverings were arranged. The water basin was placed within easy reach. Everything the queen might need during the night was positioned carefully before the attendants withdrew. The goal was simple: do not disturb the rest once it begins. As the final servant steps away and the heavy door closes gently behind them, the queen is left with only the soft glow of candlelight, the warmth gathered inside her bed curtains, and the quiet sounds of the castle sleeping around her. The day has ended. The responsibilities of royalty wait beyond the sunrise, but for these few precious hours, the queen can simply exist in silence. Soon, she will climb beneath the layers of linen, wool, and fur prepared so carefully for her. The candles will continue to flicker beside the bed, the shadows will dance upon the walls, and as her eyes grow heavy, another companion will remain nearby, a small flame fighting against the darkness, a fragile light that will guide the final moments before sleep. In the next chapter, we enter that peaceful glow and discover what it was truly like to sleep beside flickering candlelight. The final servants have quietly left the chamber. The heavy wooden door closes with a soft sound, and the queen is finally alone with the gentle rhythm of the night. Beyond the thick curtains surrounding the bed, the castle continues to breathe. A distant guard walks along the walls. A wooden beam settles somewhere above. The winter wind brushes against the shutters and disappears into the darkness, but inside the royal bedchamber, everything has slowed. Only a few small flames remain. Awake, the candles. For a medieval queen, darkness was not something easily pushed away. There were no electric lamps waiting to brighten every corner, no switches, no endless artificial glow. When the sun disappeared behind the horizon, night returned in its fullest form. The candle became one of humanity's most precious companions. Its light was small, fragile, almost alive. A single flame could transform a cold stone chamber from a place of shadows into a space of comfort. The queen's bedside candle was usually made from beeswax, one of the finest materials available during the medieval period. Unlike cheaper candles made from animal fat, beeswax burned more cleanly and produced a pleasant natural scent. The difference was noticeable. A beeswax candle did not simply provide light, it created an atmosphere. Its golden glow moved gently across embroidered curtains, carved wooden posts, and the pages of handwritten books. Every object in the room appeared softer beneath its warm light. The stone walls that seemed harsh during the day became calmer. The shadows became less threatening. The chamber became a place of rest. Yet candlelight also carried a quiet reminder of vulnerability. The flame could disappear at any moment. A small breeze slipping beneath the door, a careless movement, a drop of melted wax reaching the wrong place. The light required attention. That is why candles were placed carefully. Servants used iron holders, wooden stands, or decorative metal branches designed to keep flames stable and away from valuable fabrics. The queen's bed curtains, although protective against cold, also demanded caution. A flame too close to heavy cloth could become dangerous. Nighttime comfort always existed alongside careful awareness. The flickering candle also shaped how medieval people experienced time. Without clocks in every room, the movement of candles helped mark the passing hours. A servant might know when to return by how much wax had melted. A queen might understand that midnight had passed by the quietness of the castle and the shortened candle beside her. The night was measured not by glowing screens or numbers, but by natural signs, by darkness, by fire, by silence. Perhaps the most beautiful part of candlelight was the way it changed the feeling of the room. During daylight, the Queen's chamber was a place of responsibility, a place where important decisions were made, where visitors were received, where royal duties continued. But beneath candlelight, the same room became something entirely different, a private refuge. The Queen could sit beneath the bed curtains and watch the tiny flame dance. She might think about the day behind her, the conversations she remembered, the choices she had made, the people she had helped, the worries still waiting for tomorrow. The candle offered no answers, but its gentle presence created a moment of peace. Even the servants who moved through the castle at night understood the importance of these small lights. A candle placed in the right location could guide someone safely through a corridor. A candle beside a sick person's bed could provide reassurance. A candle near a sleeping child could make a dark room feel less frightening. Firelight connected everyone inside the castle, from the kitchens below to the Queen's private chamber above. Small flames pushed back the endless darkness as the Queen finally settles beneath the blankets. The candle beside her bed continues its slow dance. The linen sheets are warm, the wool coverings hold their heat, the heavy curtains block the worst of the drafts, and the tiny golden flame watches quietly over the room. But outside those walls, winter is still awake. The peaceful glow inside the chamber exists in contrast to the world beyond the castle. Snow continues falling, the wind continues moving, and somewhere in the darkness, a storm may be gathering strength. Soon, the calm of the bedroom will meet the power of nature outside the walls. As the candle flickers lower and the castle settles deeper into night, we turn our attention beyond the shutters, toward the frozen landscape and the winter storms surrounding the fortress in winter storms. Outside the castle walls, the candle continues its gentle dance beside the Queen's bed. Inside the chamber, everything feels peaceful. The curtains remain drawn, the blankets hold their carefully gathered warmth. The last sounds of the evening have faded into the quiet rhythm of sleep, but beyond the thick stone walls of the castle, winter tells a different story. The world outside is awake, the frozen landscape stretches endlessly beneath a dark sky, and the peaceful snowfall that covered the countryside earlier has transformed into something stronger. A winter storm is approaching. From the narrow windows high above the ground, the guards would see a landscape almost completely erased by white, fields vanish beneath drifting snow. Trees bend beneath heavy layers of ice, paths that were visible only hours before disappear beneath the storm's endless movement. The castle remains standing, but nature reminds everyone inside that human strength has limits. Medieval castles were built to withstand enemies. They were designed to resist armies, protect valuable supplies, and provide shelter during dangerous times. Yet no fortress, no matter how impressive, could command the weather. Winter was an opponent without weapons. It simply arrived, slowly, patiently, and it tested every weakness. As the wind rises, it begins to find the smallest openings in the castle, around shutters, between stones, beneath doors. The sound changes throughout the fortress. A gentle whisper becomes a low murmur. The murmur becomes a deep, endless howl moving around the towers. Inside the queen's chamber, servants would notice these changes immediately. The candles flicker more often. The fireplace requires more attention. The heavy curtains around the bed become even more valuable. Every small preparation made earlier in the evening now reveals its importance. The castle is not fighting the storm with a single solution. It is resisting through hundreds of small defenses, thick walls, wooden shutters, heavy fabrics, warm bedding, careful fires. Together, they create a fragile but effective barrier between the queen and the frozen world outside. Yet storms brought challenges that comfort alone could not solve. Travel became dangerous. Messengers carrying important letters might be delayed for days. Supplies from nearby villages could not always reach the castle. Fresh food became more difficult to obtain. Even simple tasks required more planning. The servants preparing the queen's chamber were not only creating warmth for one night, they were part of a much larger effort to help the entire castle survive the season. In the kitchens below, cooks worked with preserved food stored before winter arrived. Barrels of salted meat, dried grains, stored vegetables, carefully protected supplies that could last through the cold months. In the stables, animals were given extra bedding and attention. Horses, especially valuable war horses and traveling animals, needed protection from freezing temperatures. Every living creature inside the castle depended on careful preparation. The storm also changed the feeling of the castle itself. During summer, a fortress could feel open and connected to the world. Windows allowed fresh air inside. Courtyards filled with activity. Travelers arrived through the gates. But winter storms created isolation. The castle became its own small universe. The outside world disappeared behind snow and darkness. Inside, people relied on one another more than ever. The queen, despite her position, shared this experience. She might have had finer blankets than others, a warmer chamber, more servants to assist her, but she still listened to the same wind. She still watched the same snow. She still understood the power of winter beyond the walls. Perhaps there was something strangely comforting about such nights, when storms made travel impossible and the castle gates remained closed. Time seemed to slow. There were fewer interruptions, fewer demands. Long evenings stretched quietly beside the fire. Stories were told, books were read, memories were shared. The storm outside created a world of darkness, but inside the castle, small circles of warmth continued glowing, a candle beside a bed, a fire in the hearth, a blanket pulled close around tired shoulders. Simple things became precious. As the queen listens to the distant roar of the storm through the stone walls, sleep slowly begins to arrive. The candle burns lower. The fire settles. The castle grows quieter. Yet even in this peaceful moment, medieval people carried beliefs about the night that went beyond cold and weather. Darkness was not only an absence of light, it was a world filled with mystery, dreams, and unseen possibilities. And as the storm continues outside, we move deeper into the thoughts and beliefs that followed people into sleep, exploring royal dreams, beliefs, and nighttime superstitions. The storm continues its slow journey around the castle walls. Snow moves silently across the dark landscape, and the wind carries distant sounds through the towers. Inside the queen's chamber, however, the world has become smaller and quieter. The candle beside the bed burns lower. The fireplace glows softly. The heavy curtains hold back the cold, and beneath layers of linen, wool, and fur, the queen enters the mysterious world between waking and sleeping. For medieval people, sleep was never simply the absence of activity, the night carried meaning. Dreams were not always considered random thoughts created by the mind. Many people believed they could contain messages, warnings, memories, or even glimpses of things beyond ordinary understanding. A dream could be comforting, a dream could be frightening, and sometimes a dream could remain in someone's thoughts for many years. A medieval queen, surrounded by religious teachings and court traditions, would have grown up in a world where dreams were carefully considered. Kings and queens made important decisions, they negotiated alliances, they guided kingdoms, and naturally, they wondered whether the dreams that visited them during sleep carried some deeper significance. A dream of peace might be viewed as a blessing, a dream of danger might create concern, a strange vision appearing before an important event might be remembered as a possible sign. Of course, not everyone interpreted dreams in the same way. Some scholars attempted to understand them through philosophy and medicine, others viewed them through religion. Many ordinary people mixed official teachings with local traditions passed down through generations. The medieval world was filled with mystery. The night sky itself seemed endless and unknown. Illnesses were not always understood. Natural events could appear frightening or impossible to explain, so people searched for meaning wherever they could find it. Even the bedroom carried small protections against nighttime fears. Religious symbols were common. A cross or devotional image might rest near the bed. Prayers before sleep offered comfort and reassurance. Sacred words spoken in the quiet darkness helped many people feel protected until morning. For some, the greatest fear of the night was not the cold, it was the uncertainty. Darkness removed familiar sights. The sounds of the castle changed after sunset. A normal creaking beam could seem mysterious. A distant animal outside the walls could sound strangely close. The imagination became powerful when surrounded by silence. This was true even for royalty. A queen living in a magnificent chamber still experienced the same human emotions as anyone else. She could feel lonely during a storm. She could worry about loved ones. She could wake suddenly from an unsettling dream. The crown did not remove ordinary fears. It simply placed them behind more beautiful curtains. Medieval people also paid attention to the timing of dreams. Some believed dreams near dawn were especially meaningful because the mind was closest to waking. Others believed dreams after certain prayers or during important religious seasons deserved special attention. The changing seasons themselves influenced how people experienced sleep. Long winter nights created more hours of darkness, more time beside fires, more opportunities for storytelling. When people gathered together during cold evenings, stories about spirits, strange creatures, miracles, and mysterious events naturally became part of the conversation. The darkness outside encouraged imagination. Yet the same night that inspired fear also inspired comfort. The peaceful rhythm of winter sleep, the warmth of the hearth, the quiet protection of the castle walls, the feeling of being safely hidden away from the world. Perhaps this is why nighttime traditions became so important. They gave people a sense of order. Before sleeping, they followed familiar actions: a prayer, a final look at the fire, a carefully prepared bed, a whispered good night. These simple moments helped transform the unknown hours of darkness into something manageable. For the queen, dreams might have offered a rare escape from responsibility. During the day, every word could matter, every decision could influence others. Every appearance carried meaning, but dreams belonged only to her, a private world where memories, hopes, fears, and imagination blended together. As the storm fades into the distance, the queen sleeps peacefully beneath the protection of her curtains. The candle finally disappears. The castle grows silent, and somewhere between the last moments of wakefulness and the first signs of dawn, the medieval mind enters a place where reality and imagination meet. Yet not everyone in the castle sleeps in the same way. The queen's bed may be carefully prepared, her chamber warm, and her privacy protected, but the sleeping arrangements of medieval rulers could vary greatly depending on status, custom, and personal preference. As the night deepens and the castle rests, we quietly turn toward another question: how did the sleeping habits of kings compare with those of queens? Our journey continues with how kings and queens slept differently. The castle has fallen into its deepest silence. The storm has moved farther away, leaving only a faint whisper of wind against the stone walls. Inside the queen's chamber, the candle has nearly finished burning, and the warmth gathered beneath the bed curtains creates a peaceful refuge from the frozen night. Yet across the castle, another chamber tells a slightly different story, because although kings and queens shared the same world of medieval royalty, they did not always experience the night in exactly the same way. The image of a medieval ruler often focuses on power, the crown, the throne, the battlefield, the grand hall, filled with nobles. But when darkness arrived and the castle doors closed, kings and queens became far more similar than people might expect. Both needed warmth, both needed rest, both faced the same winter winds. Still, their sleeping arrangements reflected their different roles within royal life. A king's chamber was often designed around authority and accessibility. Even during the night, kings were expected to remain connected to affairs of state. Important messengers, advisors, and trusted officials might need access. Decisions could not always wait until morning. A kingdom did not completely sleep simply because the king did. This meant royal bedrooms were sometimes places of continued responsibility. A king might review documents before resting. He might discuss military matters. He might receive private visitors. The chamber remained connected to the wider world. A queen's chamber, while also a place of importance, often carried a different atmosphere. It was frequently associated with household management, family life, personal devotion, and private reflection. The queen's room could become a more sheltered environment where trusted companions gathered and where personal moments unfolded away from public attention. Of course, every castle and every royal family was different. History was not a single story. Some kings preferred privacy. Some queens played major political roles and held councils within their own chambers. Medieval women of royalty were not simply passive figures waiting behind curtains. Many influenced diplomacy, managed estates, advised rulers, and represented royal authority in their own right. The differences between their sleeping spaces were often about expectation rather than ability. The king's bed could represent power. The queen's bed could represent protection and continuity. The design of the beds themselves could also differ. A king's chamber might emphasize symbols of rule, carved details showing family heritage, military imagery, royal emblems, objects connected to leadership. A queen's chamber might include more elements connected to comfort, textiles, family, and personal devotion, fine embroidery, religious objects, treasured belongings, items connected to household life. But beneath these differences, the practical challenges remained the same. Both king and queen depended on servants preparing their rooms. Both required warm bedding. Both faced the cold reality of stone castles during winter. Both needed protection from drafts, darkness, and uncomfortable temperatures. The most interesting difference may have been what happened before sleep. A king often carried the weight of external concerns, the kingdom's security, political relationships, military decisions, the expectations of nobles. A queen's concerns might include different responsibilities: the royal household, children, court relationships, charitable duties, managing estates. supporting the stability of the dynasty. Their worries were not identical, but they were equally human. Perhaps the greatest illusion created by royal history is that wealth removed ordinary struggles. It did not. A golden crown could not warm a cold room, a jeweled robe could not guarantee peaceful sleep, a powerful title could not stop winter winds from reaching the castle walls. In the quiet darkness, kings and queens both depended on the same simple comforts: a warm fire, a soft blanket, a trusted servant, a peaceful moment before sleep. The difference was not that one suffered and the other did not. The difference was how their private spaces reflected the lives they were expected to lead. As dawn slowly approaches in the distance, the castle remains divided into hundreds of sleeping rooms. Some belong to royalty, some belong to servants, some belong to guards who remain awake through the night. Each person experiences the same winter in a different way, and while the queen rests behind her heavy curtains, countless unseen people continue moving through the castle, maintaining the delicate balance that keeps royal life comfortable. Their work is quiet. Their footsteps are almost invisible, but without them, no royal chamber would remain warm for long. As we leave the sleeping chambers behind and enter the hidden world of nighttime labor, our journey continues into the silent work of castle servants at night. The castle sleeps, at least, that is how it appears from the outside. Beneath the moonlight, the towers stand still against the winter sky. Snow rests upon the rooftops, and the walls seem completely untouched by movement. To anyone watching from the frozen fields below, the fortress looks like a place where time has stopped, but inside, the castle is never truly asleep. Hidden behind the quiet corridors and heavy wooden doors, a different kind of night begins. Not one of feasts or ceremonies, not one of royal decisions or grand announcements, a night of small duties, careful footsteps, and countless acts of service that allow everyone else to rest peacefully. The queen may lie beneath warm blankets, behind her thick curtains, but her comfort depends upon people who remain awake long after the final candle has been lowered. Castle servants were the invisible foundation of medieval life. Their work rarely appeared in paintings. Chroniclers often recorded the names of kings, battles, marriages, and political events, but the ordinary people who kept castles functioning were far less frequently remembered. Yet every warm room had a story behind it. Every prepared bed had careful hands behind it. Every glowing fire represented someone who carried the wood, cleaned the ashes, and protected the flame. During winter nights, this responsibility became even more important. The castle consumed warmth constantly. Fires needed attention, candles needed replacing, doors needed checking, animals needed care. Nothing could simply be ignored until morning. Near the royal chambers, a servant might quietly return to inspect the fireplace, not with dramatic urgency, but with experienced awareness. A fire that burned too strongly wasted precious fuel. A fire that faded completely left the room dangerously cold. Finding the perfect balance required knowledge gained through years of observation. The servant would gently rearrange the logs, protect the remaining embers, and leave the hearth ready to continue through the night. Elsewhere in the castle, other workers continued their tasks. In the kitchens, final preparations for the next day might begin. Large rooms required constant organization. Bread needed preparing, supplies needed checking, containers needed cleaning. Winter demanded planning. Because every resource mattered, in the stables, another world remained awake. Horses shifted beneath their blankets. Their breath created small clouds in the cold air. Stable workers checked their animals carefully, making sure valuable horses remained protected from the freezing temperatures. A healthy horse could mean travel, communication, and survival. Even in peaceful times, These animals were essential. The guards, too, followed their own nighttime rhythm, walking the walls, watching the gates, listening for anything unusual. Their experience taught them to recognize the normal sounds of the castle, the creaking of timber, the movement of animals, the changing direction of the wind. Knowing what belonged allowed them to notice what did not. Within the Queen's chamber, servants remained nearby but almost invisible. A lady-in-waiting might sleep in an adjoining room. A trusted attendant might be ready if the Queen called. Their presence offered reassurance, not because the Queen was helpless, but because medieval life depended upon community. No one, not even royalty, existed completely alone. The most fascinating part of this nighttime work is how quiet it was. There were no machines, no bright lights, no modern systems automatically controlling temperature or security. Everything depended on human attention. A person carrying a candle, a person checking a latch, a person placing another log on a fire. Small actions repeated thousands of times across generations. The castle's survival was built from these moments. Perhaps the most beautiful image of medieval night is not the Queen sleeping beneath luxurious blankets. Perhaps it is the servant walking slowly through the corridor with a candle in hand. The flame illuminates only a few steps ahead. The rest of the hallway remains hidden in darkness, yet the servant continues forward, because someone must keep watch, someone must maintain warmth, someone must protect the peaceful sleep of everyone inside the walls. As the hours pass, the castle slowly moves toward morning. The fires become quieter, the candles become shorter, the night workers begin completing their final tasks, and far above the courtyard, the first faint signs of dawn wait beyond the horizon. Soon, the Queen will wake. The castle will change from a place of sleeping shadows into a place of movement and responsibility once again. But before that happens, there is one final moment of winter darkness. The quiet hour before sunrise, a time when the world feels suspended between night and day, and in that fragile moment, we discover what it was like waking before sunrise in winter. The deepest part of the night has finally passed. The storm has grown quieter. The candles have nearly disappeared. The fires that once filled the castle with golden light have become gentle beds of glowing embers. For a few precious moments, the entire fortress seems to exist between two worlds, not fully asleep, not yet awake. This is the quiet hour before sunrise. Inside the Queen's chamber, the first signs of morning arrive slowly. There is no sudden burst of light, no alarm, no mechanical sound announcing a new day. Instead, winter morning approaches almost unnoticed. A faint grayness appears beyond the shutters. The darkness begins to soften. The night slowly releases its hold. For the Queen, waking during winter was very different from waking in a modern home. There was no instant warmth waiting, no heated room surrounding the bed, no bright sunlight pouring through large windows. The first sensation after opening her eyes would likely be the awareness of the cold air beyond the blankets. The carefully prepared warmth of the night had faded. The bed curtains still protected her. The wool and fur coverings still held some comfort. But morning always brought a return to reality. The castle was cold again. This was why servants often began their work before sunrise. The Queen's day depended upon preparation, while she remained beneath the blankets for a few extra moments. Attendants were already moving through the corridors. Fresh candles were being lit, fires were being rebuilt, water was being warmed. Clothing was being prepared. The castle slowly awakened through hundreds of quiet movements. In the royal chamber, the first servant to enter would do so carefully. Morning in a queen's room was not a sudden interruption. It was a gradual transition. Curtains were opened slightly. Fresh air entered. The fire was encouraged back into life. The room slowly changed from a place of sleep into a place of daily responsibility. The queen's morning clothing waited nearby. Unlike nighttime garments designed for comfort, daytime clothing represented status and expectation. Layers would soon return. The simple peace of the sleeping hours would give way to the visible world of royalty, but before that transformation began, there was often a small moment of ordinary humanity, the first warm drink of the day. Depending on the period and region, wealthy households enjoyed various morning refreshments. Warm drinks made from herbs or other available ingredients could provide comfort after a cold night. The warmth of a cup held between cold hands was a simple pleasure shared by people across every level of society. Winter mornings also revealed the true character of the castle. During the night, the fortress seemed almost magical: silent corridors, flickering candles, sleeping chambers hidden behind curtains. But sunrise brought back practical realities. Floors needed cleaning, fires needed maintaining, meals needed preparing, messages needed delivering. The peaceful world of sleep disappeared beneath the movement of another busy day. For the queen, this meant returning to her role. Meetings, visitors, decisions, ceremonies, the responsibilities that waited beyond the bedroom door. Yet perhaps the contrast made the nighttime rest even more valuable. The few hours spent beneath warm blankets represented a rare escape from constant expectation. Sleep was not simply a biological necessity, it was a temporary retreat, a moment when even the most powerful people in the kingdom could experience something close to ordinary life. As dawn finally reaches the castle, the first rays of winter sunlight touch the snow-covered towers. The guards change positions, the kitchens awaken, the halls fill with footsteps once again. The queen leaves the private world of her bedchamber and returns to the public world of the court. But the memory of the night remains. The warmth of the blankets, the glow of candlelight, the quiet protection of the curtains, the countless small efforts that transformed a freezing room into a place of rest. And as morning reveals the castle in full light, another question begins to emerge: how? Much of what we imagine about medieval castles is actually true. Were they always dark, freezing fortresses? Were royal chambers truly as uncomfortable as we believe? Or have centuries of stories created a picture that is only partly accurate? With the morning now fully arrived, we turn our attention toward the stories, myths, and misunderstandings surrounding these ancient homes in the biggest myths about medieval castles. Morning has finally arrived. The darkness has disappeared from the castle corridors, and pale winter sunlight now touches the ancient stone walls. The fires are being rebuilt, servants are moving through the halls, and the quiet world of nighttime has transformed into the familiar rhythm of daily life. Standing beneath the morning light, the castle looks different, less mysterious, less like the shadowy fortress often imagined in stories. For centuries, people have pictured medieval castles as cold, gloomy places where everyone lived in constant discomfort. Towers filled with darkness. Rooms without warmth. Endless stone corridors where winter never truly ended. Some of these ideas contain a small piece of truth. But many are far more complicated than they appear. The reality of medieval castles was not simply a world of misery, it was a world of adaptation. People who lived inside these enormous stone structures understood their environment deeply. They knew how to work with the materials available to them, how to create comfort, and how to make difficult conditions manageable. The first great myth is that castles were always freezing everywhere. It is easy to imagine a fortress made entirely of cold stone, with every room equally uncomfortable. But castles were not designed as empty stone boxes. They contained many layers of protection. Wooden furniture filled rooms. Heavy tapestries covered walls. Rugs softened floors. Curtains divided spaces. Fireplaces provided warmth. bedrooms were often much smaller and more enclosed than the enormous halls we picture from modern imagination. A small, carefully prepared chamber could feel far more comfortable than a huge ceremonial room. Another common myth is that medieval castles were always dark. Compared with modern homes, they certainly had less artificial light, but darkness does not mean people accepted poor conditions. Windows, candles, lamps, polished metal surfaces, and painted decorations all helped bring brightness into castle interiors. The wealthy invested heavily in beautiful fabrics and colorful artwork. A medieval castle was not necessarily a gray world. Many were filled with reds, blues, golds, and rich patterns. Another misunderstanding involves hygiene. Popular stories often portray castles as endlessly dirty places where cleanliness was ignored. The truth was more balanced. Medieval people did not have modern sanitation systems, but they cared about cleanliness. Servants swept floors, washed fabrics, cleaned clothing, maintained kitchens, and managed waste according to the practices of their time. Royal households especially placed great importance on order. A queen's chamber was not simply a room where people slept, it was carefully maintained. Another myth suggests that everyone inside a castle lived the same way. They did not. A king and queen experienced castle life differently from a guard, a kitchen worker, or a stable servant. Social position shaped everything: food, clothing, privacy, sleeping arrangements. The same building could contain very different worlds. One person might sleep beneath fur blankets in a private chamber. Another might rest in a shared space with simpler bedding. The castle was not one experience, it was many experiences existing together. Perhaps the biggest myth of all is that medieval people were completely disconnected from comfort. They were not. They searched for warmth. They created peaceful sleeping spaces. They developed clever solutions using the resources around them. They understood the importance of rest. A feather mattress, a warm blanket, a fragrant herb sachet, or a carefully placed candle may seem simple today, but in their world, these small comforts represented skill, effort, and thoughtful preparation. The medieval castle was not a perfect home. Winter was still cold. Stone was still unforgiving. Life was still demanding, but people were not simply victims of their surroundings. They were problem solvers. They adapted. They created beauty and comfort even in challenging environments. And perhaps that is what makes the story of the medieval queen's winter night so fascinating. Not the idea that she lived in impossible luxury, but that she lived in a world where every bit of warmth had to be created, every comfort had to be earned, every peaceful moment depended on knowledge passed down through generations. As the castle stands quietly beneath the morning sun, we begin to look beyond the past and toward the present. Because although our bedrooms today are very different from those inside medieval towers, some lessons from those ancient nights remain. Surprisingly meaningful, the story now moves from the cold stone chambers of the past toward the comforts of today, and what modern bedrooms can still learn from medieval queens in what modern bedrooms can learn from medieval queens. The winter sun now rests gently upon the castle walls. The long night has passed, the candles have been replaced by daylight, the fires burn brighter, and the quiet mystery of the sleeping chambers has faded into the movement of another morning. Yet the story of the medieval queen's bedroom does not truly end with the past, because hidden beneath centuries of difference, there are surprising connections between those ancient chambers and the bedrooms we create today. A medieval queen lived in a world without electric heaters, memory foam mattresses, climate control, or modern insulation. She could not simply adjust the temperature with a switch. She could not order warmth to appear instantly. Instead, comfort came through careful choices, through understanding materials, through creating an environment designed for rest And perhaps that is the first lesson modern bedrooms can borrow. Comfort is not only about having more, sometimes it is about choosing better. Medieval households understood the power of layers: wool blankets, linen sheets, soft coverings, curtains, rugs. Each layer served a purpose. Together, they created a sleeping environment that felt protected and peaceful. Today, many people still discover that natural materials can change the feeling of a room. A warm blanket during winter, breathable fabrics during warmer months, soft textures that make a space feel inviting. The medieval approach was not about luxury alone. It was about harmony between people and their surroundings. Another lesson comes from the importance of creating separation. The four-poster bed was not only a place to sleep, it was a private world. The curtains surrounding it created a boundary between rest and responsibility. In modern life, many bedrooms have become mixed spaces: work, entertainment, messages, constant information. The bedroom is often connected to the outside world through glowing screens and endless notifications. The medieval queen had a simple advantage: when the curtains closed, the day ended. The world could wait until morning. Perhaps this ancient idea remains valuable. A peaceful bedroom needs moments where the mind understands that it is time to rest. Not every comfort requires technology. Sometimes comfort comes from removing distractions. The medieval chamber also reminds us of the importance of atmosphere. A room is not only made from walls and furniture, it is created through feelings. The scent of herbs, the warmth of candlelight, the texture of fabric, the sound of quiet. Although modern homes are brighter and warmer than medieval castles, many people still search for the same feeling those ancient chambers provided: a place where the outside world becomes distant, a place where the mind can slow down, a place that quietly says, "You are safe here." Another forgotten lesson is preparation. The queen did not arrive at an unprepared bed. Servants arranged everything beforehand. The blankets were ready, the room was organized, the temperature was considered, the environment was shaped for sleep before sleep even began. Modern people often expect rest to happen instantly. We rush through busy days, enter our bedrooms exhausted, and hope our minds immediately become peaceful. But medieval routines reveal another possibility: rest can begin before we lie down. A quiet evening, a dimmer light, a calmer atmosphere, a few small habits that tell the body and mind that the day is ending. Perhaps the greatest lesson from the medieval queen is not about castles or royalty. It is about intention. She lived in a world where comfort required attention. Warmth had to be created, peace had to be protected, sleep had to be prepared. Today, we possess incredible conveniences, yet many people struggle to find the same peaceful rest that people centuries ago valued so deeply. The medieval bedroom was not perfect. It was cold, it was limited, it lacked many things we consider essential today. But within those limitations, people discovered something timeless. A good night's sleep is not only about escaping discomfort, it is about creating a place where the body feels calm and the mind feels quiet. As we return once more to that ancient castle, the Queen's chamber appears almost familiar. The blankets, the curtains, the gentle light, the peaceful silence, different century, different world, yet the same human desire remains: to close our eyes at the end of the day and feel protected from everything waiting outside. And now, as our journey through the frozen halls of the medieval castle approaches its final moments, we return one last time to the quiet room where this story began, a room filled with candlelight, a room surrounded by stone, a room where a queen prepares to surrender to sleep. Our final journey awaits, a peaceful good night inside the castle. The evening returns once more to the ancient castle. the same stone walls that witnessed the passing of countless winters now stand quietly beneath the fading light. The halls that were once filled with footsteps and voices slowly become still again. Another day has ended. The fires are being prepared, the candles are being lit, the heavy wooden doors are closing against the cold outside, and high within the castle tower, a familiar room begins its nightly transformation, the Queen's chamber. After everything we have discovered, the room feels different now. At first, it seemed like a place of hardship. A cold stone room surrounded by endless winter, a place where even royalty struggled against the freezing darkness. But now, as we return to it one final time, we see something else, not a perfect room, not a luxurious paradise, but a carefully created shelter, a place shaped by patience, knowledge, and countless small acts of care. The bed waits quietly beneath its carved wooden frame, the linen sheets have been arranged, the wool blankets are folded neatly, the curtains hang softly around the sleeping space, ready to create that small private world where the noise of the castle fades away. Outside, winter begins another performance. The wind moves across the towers, snow gathers on the rooftops, the landscape disappears beneath a blanket of white, but inside the chamber, the struggle between warmth and cold continues in a peaceful balance. A fire glows, a candle flickers, a blanket is pulled close. Simple things, yet these simple things carried enormous meaning in a medieval world. Before climbing into bed, the Queen pauses for a moment. Perhaps she looks toward the window and watches the snow falling in the darkness. Perhaps she listens to the distant sounds of servants completing their final tasks. Perhaps she thinks about the responsibilities waiting beyond sunrise, the decisions, the conversations, the expectations, the endless movement of royal life. But for now, the day is finished. The kingdom can wait. The world beyond the castle walls becomes distant. She steps behind the curtains, and the chamber becomes quieter. The candlelight reflects softly against the fabric. The shadows move slowly across the walls. The fire gives one final gentle crackle, and the Queen settles into the same human experience shared by people across every century: the search for rest, the desire for comfort, the hope that tomorrow will arrive peacefully. Perhaps this is what makes these forgotten nights so fascinating. Not the crowns, not the grand halls, not the impressive architecture, but the ordinary moments hidden behind them. A servant carrying warm stones to a bed, a carefully folded blanket, a candle protected from the wind, a quiet prayer before sleep, small actions that reveal something timeless about human life. Centuries separate us from those medieval chambers. Our homes are warmer, our beds are softer, our nights are brighter, yet the feeling we seek remains almost unchanged. We still close doors at the end of the day, we still search for a comfortable place to rest, we still hope that, for a few peaceful hours, the worries of the world can remain outside. The medieval Queen's winter night was not a story of endless luxury, it was a story of adaptation, of finding warmth in a cold world, of creating peace where peace was not always easy to find. And perhaps that is why the image remains so powerful: a woman beneath heavy curtains, a candle slowly fading, a castle surrounded by snow, a quiet night stretching into darkness, a reminder that comfort has always been something humans create, not only with wealth, not only with possessions, but with care, with preparation, with the simple choices that turn a place into a home. So as the final candle burns lower inside the medieval chamber, the castle settles into silence once again. The Queen sleeps, the servants rest, the fires continue glowing softly, and the ancient stone walls keep their secrets through another winter night. But somewhere beyond those walls, another forgotten story is waiting. another civilization, another home, another ordinary night that history has almost forgotten, because sometimes the most fascinating stories from the past are not found on battlefields or royal thrones, they are found in the quiet moments when the world finally goes to sleep.